The money arrives on a Tuesday. No fanfare, no ceremony, just a number on a screen that didn't exist yesterday. $1 million. Yours. Clean, confirmed, and sitting in your account. You stare at it for a while. Then you close your phone. And somewhere between that moment and the next morning, something quietly shifts. Not in your bank account, in you. Because here's what nobody really talks about. Receiving $1 million is an event. Keeping $1 million for 10 years is something else entirely. It's a test. And the test doesn't begin with your investment strategy, your spending habits, or your tax filing. It begins in that first moment of silence, before anyone else knows. Most people who think about this scenario focus on what they would do with the money. Buy something, invest something, quit something. The fantasy is easy. The question worth asking is harder. After 10 years, after a full decade of life happening, pressures building, relationships changing, and the world doing what the world does, would the money still be there? Statistically, the answer is uncomfortable. Researchers who study sudden wealth consistently find that a significant percentage of people who receive large windfalls, lottery prizes, inheritances, legal settlements, unexpected liquidity events, are in a worse financial position within 3 to 5 years. Not just people without financial education, not just impulsive spenders, ordinary, intelligent, well-meaning people who simply underestimated what the money would attract and what it would cost. This isn't a story about being irresponsible. It's a story about invisible forces, psychological, social, financial, and mathematical, that are already moving the moment that number appears on your screen. Understanding them doesn't guarantee you keep the money, but not understanding them almost guarantees you won't. Let's start where the story actually starts, before you spend a single dollar. Depending on how the million arrived, a meaningful portion of it may already belong to someone else. Tax law treats different types of windfalls very differently, and the gap between what you receive and what you legally keep can be significant. In the United States, lottery winnings are taxed as ordinary income, which at the federal level alone can reach 37% for high earners before state taxes are added. That $1 million prize, after taxes, can realistically become $600,000 or less. Inheritances are treated differently and often more favorably. Capital gains from investments carry their own rules. Legal settlements depend on what they're compensating for. The exact figure varies by country, by circumstance, and by how the money is structured. But the principle is consistent. The number you receive is rarely the number you get to keep. And this matters not because taxes are unfair, but because people build their plans around the wrong starting number. They think about $1 million when they actually have $650,000. The difference isn't trivial. It's the first miscalculation. And it happens before you've made a single decision. Once the real number is established, the second force begins almost immediately. And it has nothing to do with markets. People find out. Sometimes you tell them. Sometimes they notice. Sometimes a third party mentions it. But within weeks, sometimes days, the information moves. And with it comes something that financial advisors and behavioral economists have documented extensively, but that rarely appears in mainstream money advice: social pressure. A cousin needs a loan to get back on his feet. It's a small amount, relative to what you have. Your parents have been wanting to renovate their home for years. A childhood friend has a business idea that just needs a little startup capital. A sibling is behind on rent. An old colleague wants to pitch you something over dinner. None of these people are necessarily acting in bad faith. Most of them aren't. The requests are often emotionally reasonable, rooted in real need, real history, real relationships. That's precisely what makes them so financially dangerous. The psychology here is distinct from ordinary spending decisions. When you buy something unnecessary, you feel some degree of accountability to yourself. When someone you love asks you for help, the emotional cost of saying no can feel greater than the financial cost of saying yes. And with $1 million sitting in your account, the internal voice that would normally say, "I can't afford this," has gone silent, because technically, you can. Researchers who study lottery winners and sudden wealth recipients consistently note that social relationships are one of the most underestimated financial threats, not because people are malicious, though that happens too, but because generosity is genuinely hard to resist when you feel financially capable of it. $100,000 in informal loans, gifts, and goodwill gestures distributed across 2 or 3 years can dissolve from $1 million account without a single purchase ever feeling reckless. There's also a subtler dynamic at work. When you have money, your social gravity changes. People who want things orbit closer. People who feel uncomfortable around wealth pull away. The social landscape shifts in ways that are difficult to predict and harder to navigate without a clear internal framework. Without one, the path of least resistance is generosity. And generosity, unchecked, is one of the quietest ways a fortune disappears. But even if you managed the social pressure perfectly, the next force was already building in the background, quietly, invisibly, and it didn't require anyone else's involvement. Lifestyle inflation is the most self-generated wealth threat of all. It doesn't happen in a single dramatic decision. It happens across dozens of small upgrades, each of which feels entirely justifiable at the time. You were already thinking about moving to a better apartment. The extra $800 a month feels trivial now. You needed a new car anyway. Why not the one you actually wanted? The restaurant you used to consider a treat becomes your regular Thursday dinner. The vacation that used to be a reward for a good year becomes an annual baseline expectation. None of these decisions feel like mistakes in the moment. They feel like finally living comfortably. And that's the trap, because lifestyle is almost impossible to reverse. This isn't a character flaw. It's a well-documented psychological phenomenon. When your standard of living rises, cutting back doesn't register as financial discipline. It registers as loss. The brain processes downgrading a lifestyle with the same emotional weight as a genuine deprivation, even when the objective standard of living remains perfectly comfortable. Behavioral economists call this the reference point effect. The point from which we measure gain and loss shifts to wherever we are now, making retreat from any comfort feel like suffering. $1 million can support elevated spending for years, long enough for the lifestyle to feel permanent, long enough for the costs to compound, long enough for the money to run out before the habit does. The people who understand this don't tell themselves to avoid all lifestyle improvement. They make a deliberate, upfront decision about what level of living is sustainable given the actual long-term potential of their wealth. And they hold that line before the upgrades begin, not after they've already normalized. Now, add the investment dimension. Because most people who receive $1 million don't intend to spend it all. They intend to invest it. And this is where a different kind of danger appears. $1 million changes how you see yourself. It's not irrational. Having capital genuinely does create opportunity, but it also creates a psychological shift that is very difficult to distinguish from financial wisdom. The feeling that you understand investing now, that your wealth is evidence of good judgment, that the risk you're willing to take is calibrated rather than emotional. The investment world is perfectly designed to meet you at this moment. Everyone suddenly has an opportunity. A friend who has been in real estate for years has a deal that's too good to pass up. A former colleague is launching a startup and needs a first investor. A relative is convinced that a particular market move is obvious and wants to pool capital. Someone at a party explains, with complete confidence, why a specific asset class is about to shift dramatically. The difficulty is that some of these ideas are occasionally right, enough of them to create plausible stories about people who trusted their instincts and were rewarded. But the mathematics of bad investments are unforgiving. Lose 50% of your capital in a single failed venture, which happens more routinely than the stories suggest, and you need a 100% return just to get back to where you started. Lose 30% in 2 successive mistakes, and you're managing $650,000 that once looked like $1 million. Concentration in a single asset, over-leverage, illiquid positions, and time-sensitive deals that require fast decisions all carry similar risk profiles. The professional investors who preserve capital over long periods share one quality more than any other. They spend most of their energy on what they won't do, not on finding the next great opportunity. They have frameworks. They have criteria. They sit on their hands when the opportunity doesn't meet the standard, even when sitting still feels like falling behind. $1 million without a clear investment philosophy is not wealth, it's a target. And quietly, beneath all of this, there is a force operating that most people forget entirely. It doesn't require a single spending decision. It doesn't require social pressure or bad investments. It works automatically every single day simply by existing. Inflation. $1 million in purchasing power today is not $1 million in purchasing power 10 years from now. Historically, in developed economies, inflation has averaged in the range of 2 to 3% annually over long periods. That sounds modest, but at 3% per year, compounded, the purchasing power of $1 million falls by roughly 26% over a decade. The number in your account doesn't change, but what that number can buy does. Silently, continuously. This reframes the entire question. Keeping $1 million isn't just about not spending it or not losing it in bad investments. It's about protecting what it can actually do, the real value behind the number. And doing that requires putting the money to work, which immediately introduces risk. Do nothing, and inflation quietly erodes the value. Do something, and human judgment, markets, and timing enter the picture. There is no version of this that is passive. Every decision, including the decision to do nothing, has a financial consequence over 10 years. The historical record on what happens to people who receive sudden wealth is not particularly cheerful. Studies of lottery winners in multiple countries have found that financial distress often follows a major prize within a few years, with bankruptcy rates in some research exceeding those of non-winners in the same income bracket. A study published by the National Bureau of Economic Research in the United States found that receiving a large cash prize did not significantly improve long-term financial security for many recipients, and in some cohorts appeared to delay, rather than prevent, eventual financial difficulty. Professional athletes who receive large sums, young, often without extensive financial infrastructure, have been studied extensively, with some estimates suggesting a majority face serious financial stress within a few years of retirement. Sports Illustrated, drawing on multiple sources, estimated that roughly 60% of NBA players face financial difficulty within 5 years of leaving the league. These aren't cautionary tales about stupidity or weakness. They are data points about what happens when a large sum of money meets the full complexity of a human life without sufficient preparation. The mechanisms are always some combination of what we've discussed: taxes, social pressure, lifestyle, bad investments, and the slow erosion of inflation working in parallel. What separates the people who keep it? It's rarely the most financially sophisticated. It's rarely the most disciplined in an abstract sense. The common thread across the research and across documented cases is something more structural. The people who preserve sudden wealth tend to have a clear answer to a question that most people never think to ask at the moment the money arrives. What is this money for? Not in the sense of a spending list, not a goals chart, something deeper. A genuine understanding of what role this capital is meant to play in their life over the long term. Is it freedom from financial stress? The ability to take professional risks? Security for a family? A foundation for something that outlasts them? The answer shapes every subsequent decision: how it's invested, how it's discussed, who is told about it, and where the line is drawn when the pressure arrives. People who have that answer tend to build systems around it. They get legal and tax advice before announcing the money's existence to anyone. They create structures, trusts, accounts, advisors, that introduce friction between impulse and action. They make deliberate, written decisions about how much of the money is available for informal help to others, and they stick to it. They choose investment strategies that are less about maximizing return and more about surviving long enough for compounding to work. They treat invisibility as a feature, not a humility exercise. And here is the thing that nobody tells you in any financial guide: the most dangerous period for a sudden windfall isn't the first reckless decision. It's the gradual normalization of a life that costs slightly more than the money can sustain. The slow drift, over years, between what feels normal and what the capital can actually support. It's not one moment of weakness. It's 100 moments of ease. After 10 years, the people who kept their million didn't do so by being extraordinary. They did so by understanding early enough that the million was not the final destination. It was the beginning of a new set of decisions. And those decisions would be made not by the best version of themselves, sitting calmly with a spreadsheet, but by the everyday version, under social pressure, emotional weather, market noise, and the quiet pull of a life that always wants to be slightly more comfortable than it currently is. The question the title asks, Can you keep it for 10 years? Sounds like a financial question. It turns out to be a question about self-knowledge, about whether you know yourself well enough to hold a position against the forces that will, reliably and patiently, work to change it. The million doesn't test your net worth. It tests your character, your clarity, and your ability to make the same quiet, unglamorous decision, again and again, across 10 years of real life, to protect something that the world will spend considerable energy convincing you to let go of. That is the real answer to the question, and it's the one most people only understand after the money is gone. If you enjoy videos about money and wealth, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more.